Hi, everybody. This is Lilit with Level Up with Lilit. I'm here with another amazing guest. I've got Jen Martinez from Hub International here. She's got an incredible story. I'm going to let her do her introduction, and we're going to have some amazing conversations today. So, welcome, Jen. Thank you for being on my podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so tell us about yourself, please.
Yeah, well, excited to be here and be in the presence of such a great leader. And so, really excited for the engagement and the interaction that we'll have. A little bit about my background. So, I am currently the strategic partnership sales leader for View by Hub. We are a insurance brokerage platform that really lives into what does the broker of the future look like for individuals and their families as it relates to protecting what matters the most through personal lines insurance. And so oftentimes you'll hear about insurtech and maybe some technology that makes it really easy to quote, 15 seconds or 15 minutes or less. And what we say is that's only one part of a consumer's journey when it comes to protecting what matters to them. So in essence, View is a platform that enables insurance in perpetuity for a consumer's lifetime in a way that's really simple and ensures that they're not spending inordinate amounts of time trying to figure out what a policy means, right? We've talked a little bit about this.
Right.
Instead, they have a bit of a superhero in the background that's taking care of that for them.
I like that. So when you talk about what matters most, that's personal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you guys are dealing with a lot of consumers. So how do you determine what matters most to consumers?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of art and science.
Yeah.
It's somewhat similar to life, right? In that you have the science of what an asset is, or if there's a life event, right? And we see consumers maybe upgraded from a Mazda Miata to a minivan. It's probably a little one somewhere in there, right? Where naturally one would say, okay, let me get some life insurance to protect the family. The art is in the understanding of what exactly is the life stage that your family or that you yourself are in, and how do we ensure that we're building a foundation that continues to grow with you as you accumulate assets and as you continue to try to really strive for whatever life goals you have for you and your family. And so that's where the human component comes in and really complements the technology, right?
Yeah. So why did you enter the space?
I took a very creative route to financial services. I started out in the U.S. Navy in mechanical engineering, and when I separated as a civilian, I decided to pivot into economics, and was very blessed to have experiences in manufacturing, international trade, and shortly after my graduate school, I came across Nationwide, financial services company, Fortune 80 at the time. And there was an opportunity to join, and I thought, I'm not really an insurance girl. I'm very much about ideation, systems thinking, et cetera, international, right? Family background that's international. And then lo and behold, as I started researching financial services, I realized that it's very much one of the backbone industries of our economy, right, and of individuals' lives. And so so for me, being in insurance has a bit of a noble purpose. When you're and I've heard these calls, right? When you're at the site of an accident,
Right.
the last thing you need is another consumer packaged good being delivered in 24 hours, right? You need someone who is going to help you walk through maybe one of the most difficult times that you yourself will have. And so I really love the noble purpose of our sector. Insurance is not sexy, right? And there's so much innovation that takes place when you think about it from a broader protection and consumer perspective.
Yeah. I imagine, the consumer digital experience is important too, but there
Absolutely.
are certain life events that happened where they couldn't care less about what technology you're using to get to them faster. They just need a person.
Yeah.
And they just need that human connection.
Absolutely.
So how do you guys differentiate between when to stop being so digital and when to be physically present for them?
Yeah, I think this is the beauty of being customer centricity, right? So we call it allowing the consumer to choose their own adventure.
Yeah.
And so if they want to be digital first, by all means, you can quickly get a quote within 90 seconds or less. You can look at your insurance digital wallet to see where all of your policies are when renewals coming up. You can live chat. Um, and if you say, you know what, I know that hurricane season is right around the corner, and I want to make sure that given inflationary pressures, my home is properly covered. I need to talk to someone.
Yeah.
You can quickly pick up a phone, and we answer within 15 seconds or less. And so it's to us, it's about giving the consumer choice and enabling those paths so they can choose for this moment at this time, do I need a digital experience or do I really need to speak to a human who understands exactly where I'm at right now?
Yeah, I like that. I always find it fascinating the types of things that affect consumer behavior, right? Humans, like anybody really.
Yeah.
And it's different for everybody. Obviously there's the environmental factors that will affect everybody similarly, but there's other things where depending on the consumer's personality, what affects their behavior is absolutely
Absolutely.
fascinating. So
Absolutely.
sometimes like, I love this conversation because we talk about advertisement and too much advertisement and consumers get frustrated, but what it's a psychology. Like you get to
Yeah.
know the consumers. This is going to drive Jen's behavior, and therefore let me give Jen exactly what she wants. Forget the noise in the background. I'm going to give Jen exactly what she
Exactly.
wants. And so working for a company or being a company that is there for the consumer,
Yeah.
understands them as a human rather than a lead. We all love talking about leads.
Right.
They're not a
Right.
lead. They're not a digital footprint. They're actually a human being behind all of this.
Absolutely. And that human being has certain anxieties,
Yes.
right? They have certain responsibilities. They may have a family, whatever the form that looks like for them, right? They may have aspirations and dreams. And so, you're not going to really get that through pixels,
That's
right? Ones and zeros are not going to communicate that. It's actually speaking to an individual that listens, that's actively listening, that takes time to unpack and so unpack what's going on in that individual's life. And so one thing that I really love is, part of our design principles are we do not have an average handle time that we measure our team by. And when you usually call, a call center or an advisory team, right? It's not uncommon to hear you've got to end the call within 3 minutes, 4 minutes,
Right.
etc. That is not our approach. Our approach is however long it takes to make sure that that consumer feels protected, optimistic, right, and has a sense of trust and peace in their life. That's our average handle time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you guys help your agents understand how to communicate with consumers to build that relationship? At the end of the day, we've talked about this.
Absolutely.
Every transaction is relationship
Yeah.
based, right?
Yeah.
Even if the relationship is simply, I've already gotten a product from you and I like the experience of it, that's still a relationship, right? But in your case,
Absolutely.
the concierge service that your agents can provide, that is a human to human relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's really interesting to think through, how do you create a culture in today's very digitally savvy age
Right.
that is much more humanized?
Yeah.
And, our agents fully remote. We use intelligent routing to route an agent that's closest to where our consumer lives for trust building, idiosyncrasies that might occur because of geography or whatnot. And even more so than that, the environment that we create, we use Lean Six Sigma. We have huddles throughout the day, and then we use different tools to make sure that that kind of human conversation, despite being in a tech heavy environment, is still taking place within the team, and then within the team that reflects out towards our customers.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of coaching, a lot of verbal and nonverbal communication. We have our GIF game, or our GIF game, as I say, as a true Gen Xer, GIF or GIF. But our GIF game is pretty legit, and
Nice.
and then beyond that, our culture is incredibly underscored, such that it's reflecting what we need to give to our consumers
Yeah.
or to our clients, really.
Yeah. It's the basic concept of emotional intelligence,
Oh,
right?
totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing worse than speaking to an agent who's just like, I saw your quote. Let me get you off the phone as fast as I can.
Yeah.
Right. For us, it's so much more than that, and you see that how we've engineered the customer life cycle. So when a consumer speaks with us, it's not just thanks so much. You'll get an email follow up. we literally have a pulse check with the consumer, a human pulse check 24 hours afterwards, and then throughout their entire lifetime when they're with Hub. So it's
Mm.
not a it's not just a one and done.
What about this? There's widespread of variety of consumers, right? They
Hmm.
have different social, economic demographics. They
Absolutely.
have like different backgrounds and education and
Hmm.
sophistication too. And so there it could range anywhere from I know I need this level of insurance, I
Hmm.
can't afford it, to I've got money, I know I need insurance, you take care of it for me.
Yeah.
So where is that gap? How is that gap bridged? Because reading policies is not easy, understanding insurance is
Yeah.
not easy. It's been around forever, right?
Yeah.
But people, it's like accounting. It's been around forever. Uh,
Yes.
but but people don't sit
Yeah.
down and try to understand and read it because they think they trust the agent that's
Hmm.
speaking to them, the person that's speaking to them, to make sure they're
Yeah.
covered. But there is a level of education that still needs to happen to know
Yeah.
what works for you and what doesn't.
Absolutely. Interestingly enough, like what attracted me to this sector is that we were one of the most mature sectors, right? The first mention of insurance was Hammurabi's Code, which is super fascinating, right? Like the Medici were part of our godfathers as a sector,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'd say that you know as as one of the top brokers, was fifth largest global broker, um, ranked first from a personal lines perspective in North America. We offer that range of services, and even more so for those that come through the View platform. The agent is taking time to educate them, and that goes back to culture and even small things
Right?
like the average handle time that I mentioned,
Yeah.
right? If you've got an average handle time requirement of 3 minutes or less, well, guess what? You're probably not going to explain what deductible means, which for many segments is really important, right? Me as a multicultural Latina, right? Um, the word deductible does not exist in Spanish. That's just one example, right? And so being able to pause and say, hey, so and so consumer or client, you may not be familiar with this, or you might have a question about what this even means. Let's walk through that and provide examples and life
Right.
cues. So that's one thing that I really pride ourselves on. And again, that all anchors back to culture, right?
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah.
So tell me about the technology aspect of this. I mean, you're dealing with, everything that you're building is to service the consumers, right? It's to make
Mm-hmm.
Hub International a better and more sophisticated company. It
Yeah.
already is. It's been there for so long. But, there's a technology
Yeah.
behind the scenes, and then there's a technology that the
Yeah.
consumer is seeing. Tell me
Yeah.
about that
Yeah.
worldview.
So I'd say, our design principles were around simplifying insurance, right?
Yeah.
And offering this kind of fresh perspective on insurance. We know for consumers from focus groups that oftentimes an individual will equate getting insurance to April 15th, which, given the accounting background,
Right?
right? It's not necessarily like spa day for consumers, right?
It's
And so,
doomsday.
yeah, exactly.
Unless you have a refund, then it's
Exactly. There you
doomsday.
go. There you go. And so on the front end, when you visit View, it's very clear we took a very fresh perspective to financial services. You're not going to see dark blue with pinstripes and kind of this
Mm,
very financial services vernacular, right? We really did try to simplify it. And we created an experience such that, again, it's not just the quote, right? The quote is just one small part of an individual's insurance journey. It's really, yes, we can simplify the quote, 90 seconds or less, no issue. What happens after you get the quote? And that's where I really love our technology and believe that the design principles we have around never quote again, proactive advice, simplifying management, right? So things like a digital insurance wallet,
mm-hmm.
things like a service desk, things like renewal and proactive advice that comes digitally as well as analog. Those are all front end. And then on the back end, I mean, there's nothing worse than having like a patchwork of systems, right? That don't talk to each other, right? It's like, yeah, it's like French and then Mandarin, and you're
Right.
like, we're nowhere in between.
We need a translator.
Yeah, and so we really invested in the first couple of years of View of making sure that our environment is completely modernized and integrated. So, CRM, and there's no phantom CRMs, right? There's not a special project. We are all on the same platform. It's fully integrated with telephony, workforce management,
Nice.
quoting, knowledge management, policy systems, commissions, that's all fully integrated into one environment, such that when our agent is interacting, they're seeing a wiki page of that consumer record that's tied to the phone number, that's tied to the policy, and it just creates a really seamless experience for the agent, such that they can deliver that to the client.
Right. They focus on the important things, the
Yeah.
product that they're delivering,
Exactly.
rather than where do they have to log in to see what
Exactly.
information to even talk to the consumer.
Exactly. And I think sometimes we forget that, you know, we put so much focus on customer centricity, and sometimes that we forget that our teams are also customers,
Right.
right? They're internal customers, but nonetheless, they're still customers, and you have to design for them as well. Because there's nothing worse than trying to deliver a phenomenal experience with like band-aids and paper clips, right? And so,
Right.
so it's very integration is a key principle, and the agent experience was one of our main stakeholders.
Yeah. How is your team environment? Everybody's remote. At some point, you have a new agent that's talking to the consumer and they need help to,
Yeah.
whether it's to explain to the consumer whatever they're trying to
Yeah.
explain the policies, or, there's a technical glitch, I need help. So
Yeah.
how is that interaction happening?
Yeah, a huge hat tip to our operations leadership. So, as a leadership team, the founders of you were very intentional about prioritizing talent over technology, over strategic initiatives, over sales. The first pillar was talent, and you see that play out in our operations team. So today they're using technology, whether it's Teams or Slack. There's a consistent thread. I call it our stream of consciousness for the agents. And so if a question comes up, within 10 seconds, there's a response, right? And then that team also meets a couple of days or a couple times during the day. So we incorporate Lean Sigma principles throughout the operations environment, have virtual huddle boards, and then there's also the coaching from not only quality teams, but also their direct supervisors and leads. So there's a very interactive environment where an agent is never on an island. And
Right.
so it's all about your success is our success, my success is your success, and that is really very much embedded in like how we operate day to day.
Okay. Well, let's talk about your success.
Uh,
What grounds you, Jen? What keeps you going?
oh man, I am all about living a life that explores and pursues wonder and awe.
Nice.
And part of that is because, I'm the daughter of an immigrant who made a huge sacrifice to come to this country in the 60s. In fact, whenever there's a tough day that I have, I still have my mom's shoes like right next to my desk to remind me of the journey that my ancestors came from. And so for me, sure, there's like monetary success, financial success, and
Of course.
career success. I really anchor myself though on something so much bigger of, how do I self-actualize and be a positive impact for myself, for my immediate family, for my community, and for my team. And so part of that is a balance of continuous improvement on the professional development side, right? So, we were just talking about AI earlier, right? So not having to Google what is an API or ChatGPT, right? So there's that component. And I think just as important as leaders, especially as female leaders, making sure that we're staying humble by remembering life is so much more than what we're checking into every morning, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's hiking, like really ancient trails, or doing something that scares me, like skydiving, or having that adrenaline rush, learning something new, and remembering like the different layers of a place. I mentioned the Camino Santiago and how ancient Egyptians used to use that same trail 5,000 years ago. To me, it makes me feel so small, and remember like life is so fleeting. How do I make the most of it, right? And how do
Yeah.
I make the most of the blessing of just being alive?
Yeah. I think that's a humble experience to have, right? It's like, a lot of people know I'm afraid of the water, the ocean,
Yeah.
and so but I love going there because it's the one place where I feel grounded and I feel like you're looking out into this ocean and it's so big
Yeah.
and you're so small, and because you're small, your problems are even smaller.
Yeah.
And so it kind of brings you back to like I can let go of this stress. I
Yeah.
can let go of this A, B, and C problems. I can deal with D in a certain way. And
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with saying like my success is because I love money, right?
Yeah.
But what is that money paying for? What are you
Exactly.
spending that money on? And that's where you can actively perceive the type of person that you are.
Exactly.
Where are you spending that money? What is
Yeah.
your values of life, and where's your quality?
Yeah.
And so I took up hiking a couple of years
Yeah.
ago too, and my first hike was Camelback, and it was
Phenomenal.
oh man,
Not a
it was
beginner's hike.
hard. It was not a beginner's hike.
I feel
Yeah,
like that's
yeah.
very much you just went for it.
I
You
did.
just-
I did. And it was kind of hot.
Yeah.
And I did not pack enough water. I had a big
Arizona,
backpack
yeah.
with a lot of sugar in it, but not enough water. But I did make it up there, and I sat up there for like 15 minutes,
Yeah.
and I looked out, and it's another experience like the ocean, right? You're looking
Mhm.
out. People are small.
Yeah.
Even the general environment is
Yeah.
small, and you kind of have this reflection.
Yeah.
And then you go back to it because it's your high. It's what gives you that
Absolutely.
groundness,
Absolutely.
right?
And I'd say, sometimes we talk about like these experiences like they have to be this once in a lifetime type of trip, right? I find that, and I'm sure you do as well, like sometimes in everyday life, for me, I find these like magical moments oftentimes at the airport. And so, my first language is English and Spanish. And so, oftentimes I'll be at the airport and there's not a translator that's available for maybe an older couple that's traveling, right? And being able to be a bridge and a translator for them and have a sneak peek into like, oh, that's right. How blessed am I to have this life, and how blessed am I to be able to help these people navigate what can be a really scary situation. Imagine not speaking the language and being at a very busy airport just trying to
Yeah.
get home, right?
Yeah.
And so in those instances, like the humanization of being a translator for me is also like it's not a lifetime trip. I'm not going to Patagonia, right? And hiking, it's something small, but that being cognizant and being grounded enough to remember like, oh yeah, these are the magic moments that make all of this worthwhile, is also really important.
Yeah, I definitely need to brush up on my travel, but I do know, coming from a small country myself,
Yeah.
I do know culture is important when it comes
Yeah.
to that, because there's two ways to travel. You can either travel as a tourist, which
Yeah.
you see the best spots,
Yeah.
go to the most expensive restaurants, and or you can go local, and
Yeah.
you can really interact with the people that actually live there. And in my culture, if you Jen were to go to Armenia, you will eat a lot.
I
You will
love it.
have a place to sleep.
It's
It
very
doesn't matter
Latino.
whose door you knock on. Some grandma's gonna take you in
I
and give
love
you a hug,
it.
and you're gonna be introduced to everybody, and they're gonna keep in touch with you until
Yeah,
you
yeah.
visit again, right? So there's those two types, and
Yeah.
I think I want to be that person that goes local in
Yeah.
places that I travel to, because it's easy to be tourist. I mean, money pays
Yeah, it
for
is.
that, but the experience is where that is where
Yeah.
all the people are, and
Absolutely.
what they've gone through in their culture and their environment. And even in America, there's parts of America you go to and you're like, you don't even have to always leave America to see some amazing places. And we've done a really good stuff here. And I think it
Yeah.
helps us appreciate where we come from and where other cultures come from as
Yeah.
well.
Well, your experience on Camelback, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, going through a bit of the pressure and stress, and I'm sure you grew from that, right? Like
Yeah. I mean,
being
when you see a 6-year-old hiking up that mountain, I'm like, I got
outside
this.
of that.
I'm going to pretend I can breathe for the next few
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah. It's incredibly humbling, and so yeah, I think to your point, like, how do you remember to not be a tourist in your own life?
Yeah. Live
Right.
in the present.
Yeah.
I am actively working on that. It's not easy
Yeah.
to do.
No.
You go home, you take a lot of problems with you. You remember conversations you've had. It's the exchange of energy, right?
Yeah.
What do you have to figure out what you want to do with that exchange of energy when you
Yeah.
get home. A lot of times it's like, okay, but last email and last
Yeah.
text. But living in the present, being able to set that aside, even for like an hour or two,
Yeah.
nobody says executives can't really have a 9 to 5 job, but
Yeah.
you can prioritize differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think making sure you're prioritizing self
Yeah.
is really important. We talked a little bit about this, right? And I loved your perspective of like, how do you be a good leader for others if you yourself are not a good leader in your own life and with your family? And much of that is kind of flaming what your own passion is and staying curious, right? And saying, Yeah, during the day, sure, I'm gonna really kill it as a leader, right? As an executive, and I'm also going to continue to stay alive and stay have a sense of vitality by exploring these other personal interests, right?
Yeah.
That then feed energy, which then your team feels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your team, your clients feel, and so I think that's also really critical.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. You spend a lot of time listening to a lot of people, good or bad.
Yeah,
There's problems you listen to, and there's good successes you listen to, and
yeah,
obviously those give different emotional impact to you.
yeah,
But as a leader, you're expected to lead. When you go home, though, sometimes it's like, I want to let go of the charge. I
yeah,
don't want the charge anymore. I
yeah,
just
yeah.
want to lay down on a couch and be served.
Yes, absolutely.
Or find the thing that serves you.
Yeah,
Like if it's hiking, it's doing something for
yeah,
you. It's not a person, it's a thing, and it doesn't matter what it is. You've
yeah,
structured your life in a way where it gives back to you. All
yeah,
that energy that you exerted, you get it back in one way or another.
absolutely.
But you have to tailor it yourself. I can't
Yeah.
look at somebody that loves to swim and say that's going to be my thing, cuz that's never going to be my thing.
You're not going to swim the English
No,
Channel anytime
no, I'm
soon.
okay. I'll take a boat.
You're like, I'll buy a kayak or stand up
Yeah.
paddleboard for that.
Yeah. But that comes back to like how you operate business,
Yeah.
how you train your people to operate business, right? At the end of the day, who's your end user? What do they need?
Yeah.
You don't know their life. You don't know what they're going through, and
Mm-mm.
every empathy that you give them can
Yeah.
make a huge impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's what I love about customer centricity, right? Is that, well, in our and I really love the choose your own adventure, like enabling a customer to select what matters the most to them and the way that they want to interact, because you're essentially empowering them to, in this instance, interact and select and engage in a way that matters to them.
Yeah.
So you're almost empathizing by acknowledging that, sure, it may be highly efficient to have a digital journey, right? But outside of efficiency, you're actually putting the customer again at the center of the design. And so to your point, right? Like, how do you step outside of yourself and think of other perspectives? And
Mm-hmm.
and and that's one of the reasons why I love that principle of customer centricity.
Yeah, and it's also the timing too, right? At any
Hmm.
given time, what is your adventure today
Yeah,
versus what is it going to be 5 years from now? Like
yeah,
we as service providers to these customers, we have to respect changes in behavior.
yeah,
We have to respect changes in adventure sense, right?
yeah,
I told you I started hiking 2 years ago. Before
yeah.
that, if you sold me hiking gear, I'd be like, what is this? I need some heels, okay? But now, like
You're like, why is there a bladder on my back?
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Now my sense of adventure has
Yeah.
changed, and I like to be heard when I'm shopping this time because
Yeah.
it's different from the way I would have shopped 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think that's also very important, and that comes back to like, you can't treat somebody like a lead because lead today is different from lead yesterday, but it's the same
Yeah.
person,
Yeah.
and it could actually be a different experience for that person depending
Absolutely.
on who talks to them today versus yesterday, and what's being offered to them today versus
Yeah.
yesterday.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think I love that same analogy for our own like, kind of like leadership journeys as well, right? Like maybe in a prior life, like maybe Jen in her 20s, not to talk about myself in third person, but nonetheless, I was much more ambitious. I was much more um, uh, milestone driven, right? And maybe didn't have as much compassion in my leadership style. It was all about how fast can we get it done and how much can we do, right? And I think today, stepping back from that, you know, seeing that evolution of us as individual leaders, I'm still striving for, yes, I want to knock it out of the park. I want to be exceptional on my milestones and goals, absolutely, and I want it to be meaningful beyond just a balance sheet,
Yeah.
right? Beyond a P&L. Like, in what other ways? It's almost spiritual, right? In what other ways can I really generate impact that may be intangible, but again, meaningful? And
Yeah.
so I think we can apply that same choose your own adventure um, evolution to us as leaders as well.
Yeah. And I like the topic of risk appetite, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's in business or in life, the older you get, the less of a risk appetite you have, right?
Yeah.
But you kind of need it because that life goes on with risks. Like you have to take them, and so
Absolutely.
just by the time like you're a certain age, your
Yeah.
risk is just to get out of the house once a day, like at least do that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But before it's like, oh, today I'm gonna do this, tomorrow I'm gonna do this, tonight I'm
Yeah.
gonna get really drunk and
Yeah,
I'm gonna
yeah.
have a great time, right?
Yeah.
So that changes, and
Yeah.
so you're taking less risks, but you're trying to take major risks
Yeah.
because these are milestones now. You're not
Yeah.
looking at risk today, you're looking at what risk do I have to take for the next phase of my life.
Yeah.
And that changes, and that really, I
Absolutely.
think that's when people grow. That's when you get to know yourself,
Yeah.
because what type of risk are you willing to take at
Yeah.
certain age, and vote for, right? You
Yeah.
can't just say I'm just gonna do this because I want to anymore.
Yeah.
It's, I need to feel alive, and therefore this is what I'm gonna do. Or I
Yeah.
need to, I'm stagnant, this is the next step I need
Yeah.
to take, and if I don't take the risk, I'm always gonna be here, and I'm gonna have the same day every day I
Absolutely.
wake up.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, that's why it's so important to think about, I often think about like the end in mind, right? I start with the end in mind. And for me, like individually, I know I want to live a life of impact. I want to be that aunt that, my nephews are talking to me and they're like, does she really do that, or is she drinking today? And so I want to have like
We're
that.
gonna validate this
Yeah,
story
yeah,
tomorrow
I
after
know.
she's sober.
So I really want to have like that portfolio of experiences that reflect, again, wonder and awe and audaciousness, right? And so knowing that that's like the end in mind, right? Making decisions today of like personal health. How do I stay? How do I ensure vitality? And we talked a little bit about one of my hiking trips where I hiked Mount Cutler outside of Colorado Springs. It was about 400 yards from the summit, and I start seeing cat prints, and it's not like kittens, right? It's like it's more than likely a mountain lion, right? Because I'm on a mountain and I'm by myself, and the risk was, do I continue to summit, acknowledging that there's a predator somewhere around here, or do I shy away and like come back down the mountain and be super safe, right? And knowing that the end in mind is to have this patchwork of experiences, it's like, oh no, hell,
Yeah.
let's go.
Yeah.
And if it happens, then what an amazing way to like go out, right?
Yeah,
No, that's
exactly.
not for everyone,
Yeah.
right? But that's just an example of, and that's an example of how thinking with the end in mind, whether it's in your career, ideally it's broader for your lifetime, right? Is so important.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that I really try to like echo in my relationships is, what kind of life do you want to live, and how do you want to live what you've been given as
Yeah.
this gift?
That specific example, the
Mhm.
prince, I think that's a good lesson, right?
Yeah.
Because the risk is there,
Totally.
but you saw it, right? You saw the risk. Now you're going to be aware of your surroundings. You're going to know this. It's the journey of life, though, right? You
Yeah.
know there's risk. So you have two choices: go blindly or do your research and know what the risks are,
Yeah.
and watch every step that you do to make sure that you still get to your end goal.
Yeah.
I don't think that those environments should change
Yeah.
your direction, but it does open your eyes and make you more aware. And I think that is the better way to go
Yeah.
to the end
Yeah.
with the end in mind than not knowing. I
Yeah.
think ignorance is not bliss in
Yeah.
a lot of places. It's bliss when you're a kid.
Yeah.
It's amazing. But the older you get, ignorance is no longer bliss.
No,
I
you're
wish
no
it was,
longer
but-
invincible. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Wouldn't you say that's a bit of like innovation as well, right? Like as you're paving new paths, right? You know that there's risk of potential failure, potential IP transfer that puts you at a disadvantage, etc. So to some extent, to your point, you could use that analogy when you're thinking about startups, when you're thinking about business leadership,
Right.
when you're thinking about innovation as well.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what makes you wake up the next day? What do you look forward to when you're going to sleep? Do you have some ritual? Do you have a thought process, like, or is it, as long as I wake up tomorrow, I am good?
Yeah, I think it's probably a blend of a little bit of
Okay.
both of those. I do have a ritual, so I am very big on like sleep health, which is really
Nice.
important. And I think for anyone especially in business development and sales, for me, I'm a bit of an ambivert. I tend to be skew sometimes more introverted. So during the day, I'm giving a lot of energy out, right? And I have to recover. And if
Yeah.
I don't recover, then I'm not good
I
for
know the
myself,
feeling.
my family, or others. And so I do have a sleep ritual. I am really big in the morning. I literally eat the same thing and have for like the past 10 years. And so I have.
What is it? If you know what-
It's not super glamorous.
avocado
It's
toast.
no, it's not that California, which I probably isn't California anymore, but nonetheless,
It's pretty California.
yeah. So like I'll have water with lime,
Healthy.
and then I make my oat milk latte with cinnamon, which is like an horchata type of latte, if
Okay.
anyone's familiar with horchata, and then it's yogurt with cacao nibs, cinnamon, some type of berries, which are really good for memory, um, as well as pistachios. And
Nice. That's
that's
very specific.
yeah. I've actually
So
written
the
this
grocery store
down.
knows you by name.
It's really
behavior.
sad. It's really like, yeah. My nephews know when they open up the fridge, like they have their
You're not
section,
gonna have anything.
and
they
then
want.
I have my section. Do not touch DP's section. Yeah.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah.
I am a creature of habit, and you've
Yeah.
been in the Navy. I know that the discipline is huge,
Yeah.
and waking up at a certain time every day, sometimes doing the same thing. Some people can call it boring. I call it centralizing yourself.
Totally.
This is the way. This is familiar space. Everything outside of my home is no longer familiar, so I'm gonna at
Yeah.
least stick to as much of that as possible.
Absolutely. It's kind of like engineering spontaneity at the right time, right?
Yeah.
So, like, do I need to be spontaneous for breakfast? Probably not,
Yeah.
right? Do I need to make time by knowing like these certain things are taken care of for my family and knowing like, hey, during this hour slot, like, let's explore, let's do something different. So I really love engineering spontaneity and making sure that the mundane really stays mundane so I can maximize the other parts of my life for my family,
Yeah.
not for myself.
Plus,
a
it
little bit.
makes your adventures that 10 times better,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Everything else is very ritual.
There you go.
Yeah, I love this. Well, I have a riddle for you before we end.
Okay.
You don't have to solve it, but if you know the answer, please feel
Oh my
free to
gosh.
say it.
Okay.
Otherwise, the viewers will help you afterwards.
Okay.
So here's the riddle. It's a little sad, but it's a pretty interesting riddle.
Okay.
It's thought process. So we have a father and son driving,
Okay.
and while they're driving, they get into a car accident, and unfortunately,
It's very sad.
father dies, and the son is rushed to the hospital.
Okay.
And so while he's in the hospital, the doctor comes out to see this boy and inspect him and says, "That's my son. How is this possible?"
I might need a second.
Okay.
I feel like this is very insurance relatable.
I love how your brain just goes to insurance. I love it. Okay, we'll come
Okay.
back to it, but I want to thank you. This
Yes.
is very inspiring, and I'm going on your next adventure with you, by the way.
I hope you do.
I could use some exposure.
I
out
hope
there.
you do. And thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
Yeah, a big admirer and super fan of Lilit. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate the opportunity.
And I want to thank our viewers for watching. This was Jen Martinez of Hub International, and we're going to have her back to tell us about her adventures. And I had a great time talking to her. I'm going to join her adventures at some point. And thank you so much. And this is Level Up with Lilit. Have a great day.